Coming up on Regarding Men, movie review, Pink Floyd's The Wall.
Well, hello there, friends. Welcome to Regarding Men, where we hold men in high regard and where red pill isolation comes to die.
Quick death.
There we go. I thought it was a quick death, but
It is
apparently
a quick
not. I'm Janice Fiamengo. Slow and painful. Okay, there it is. Well, we're off to a good start. As you know, I'm Janice Fiamengo, and as always, I am joined by my good friends, Tom Golden of Men Are Good.
Men Are Good.
And by Paul Elam of paulelam.com. And we're doing a movie review today, and the movie that we are going to discuss is Pink Floyd's The Wall, the movie version. And of course, the music was written by Roger Waters. It was directed by Alan Parker, and the art director was Gerald Scarfe. And this is essentially an extended rock opera or an extended music video. It lasts about an hour and a half. It has very little dialogue. It's mostly images, some really wild psychedelic images, and the music of Pink Floyd from The Wall. And it's about, it's essentially an autobiographical or fictional autobiography of Roger Waters, and it's about. It takes a deep dive into the tormented psyche of the artist figure. We see him at the beginning of the film, sitting in his room, and we see him at the end of the film sitting in his room. So it seems as if maybe everything that we watch is going on in his mind as he reviews his memories of his life and the things that have tormented him and his imaginings. And he is in a way a contemporary romantic hero, and the pain of his past, the pain that he deals with is inseparable from his insights into the pain of the world. And that's what the movie explores, and that his sense of the pain of the world and of his own personal difficulties, that's at the root of a deep alienation that also allows him to diagnose the ills of his contemporary society. I think.
And that he was, that in the story, they are exposing or trying to expose how you get Hitlers. There's Nazi references all the way through this thing. And I think they were trying to partly explain how does the personality of a Hitler or a Hitler type, or certainly an extreme fascist, how do they evolve? How do they come into being, both as an individual and how the society tends to follow them? Because the experience between the main character in this story and society itself are on very similar tracks. And they expose that visually throughout the film.
Yeah, in a way, I thought that although you can certainly read the film as the fictional autobiography of the main character, you can also see him, as you're suggesting, Paul, as a kind of, I don't know, like an archetypal symbol for the society, I guess like the post-World War II generation. And this little boy born during the Second World War carries wounds from the war, particularly his loss of his father and all the resulting problems. I know you want to talk about that more, Tom. The problems that come to him as a result of that deep loss and the whole story is about him trying to come to terms with that in some way. But I thought, well, like for our purposes here at Regarding Men, it's also about fatherlessness in general, and even in cases where fathers are present, it's about the delegitimation or the lack of authority that fathers have in our society, and the kinds of problems that creates. And the suggestion certainly in the movie is that really everything that comes after, whether it's alienation, fear of the devouring feminine, an inability really to respond to the feminine other, also kind of anarchism or a sense of rootlessness, a sense of wanting to destroy things, all of that, the protests of the 1960s and 1970s that took place, which is figured in the film as well, that much of it is connected to fatherlessness, either actual and literal or metaphorical and symbolic. And yes. I thought it was, that's the part that I found most moving, the scenes with the little boy and his lostness and his longing. There's an early scene where he's in a playground. His mother has gone off to shop, and he's looking at a father playing with his son in the playground. And he tries to take that man's hand and to latch on to him as a father figure. And that father recoils from him because, of course, he isn't his son. And the sorrow and pain of that boy is, I think those are the most affecting scenes in the movie for me anyway.
That was a great scene.
Go ahead, Tom.
I was just going to say it was just a great scene and a powerful scene. And right before that, the same man had put him onto the merry-go-round thing that he pulled his shorts. Can you put me on? And he put him on. And so he was hoping that maybe he could latch on to this man, just this craving for this masculine, something to hold his hand and to guide him. And he gets nothing, he gets pushed away, which is kind of the theme that developed.
What they did real powerfully throughout the movie was they set that up. But I agree with Janice, that playground scene was heartbreaking to watch that. It was just totally devastating.
Yes.
And the whole story revolved around, even as an adult, he's sitting there in front of a TV watching old war movies looking for his father. The father longing in him remains central to the character well into his adult life and affects all his other relationships, just as his relationship with his mother did. I want to point out something sort of technical here. I ordered the movie off of Amazon, got the DVD and watched it. Want to tell everybody, don't bother. The sound levels are all over the place. It's just awful. I had to sit when I watched it with the remote, turning it up and down every 2 or 3 minutes because sound was out of balance. But anyway, more to the point, the other side of this description is that you do have this overprotective mother who has formed an inappropriate, emotionally incestuous bond with a child, I'm sure, out of her husband's absence. And that makes the boy more needy about his mother's approval. There's a song in there called Mother that's, I don't even have the lyrics handy or anything, but you start getting this sort of what you call a hostile dependent relationship between the mother and child. He hates the mother. He can't live without the mother and her approval.
Right.
And because of this, all of this, he cannot bond effectively. And they demonstrated that very nicely. His inability to bond with women of any kind. A groupie is trying to turn him on. He's not interested. His wife was trying to get his attention, and he was involved with himself, withdrawn, still in this wound for the original wound from the missing father.
Yes. And
it wrecked his entire life.
Yes.
And of course, out of that desperation, he builds the wall.
Yes. Mm-hmm. The early scene where the father dies, you don't really know it's the father yet, but I mean, it's like the father dies in this. He was defending Anzio, the Battle of Anzio, and the father died there. Yeah. And turns out Waters' father did die in the Battle of Anzio when he was 5 months old. So this is a recreation of that. And if you look at Waters' material, I think 4 of the different Pink Floyd albums, he wrote songs about his father. They were all about that. So from my perspective, this is a movie about grief. This is masculine
Yeah.
grief. He is using this movie as a means to tell his story. And in fact,
Yeah.
the director apparently had to tone down what Waters wanted to put in because Waters wanted to make it about his story. The director said, no, 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 let's make it about everyone's story. We'll make it about Pink, you know? So I think that we can assume that a lot of what we see at this movie is Waters' own story. And you can get a sense of his mindset and what goes through his mind by watching this movie and the intrusion of these thoughts that just come blasting in out of no place. These animations that just come up and whack you. That's kind of, I think that's a clue that that's what partly is going on with him. And it's amazing, that he was able to be as successful as he was, given that kind of consciousness, given that kind of pain. But, I mean, the pain from fatherlessness is incredible. I think, Janice, you're absolutely right. This is not just about the death of a father. This is about fathers who are not in the home or fathers who are in the home who are devalued. And we're seeing that more and more and more, and we're starting to pay the price for it. So this movie is really telling us a story. It was made in the 70s. I think, Paul, you said it was redone in the early 2000s.
Yes.
But it's
I don't
still
remember
that
the exact year. Was it 25 years after the
Yeah.
original movie was released? They did the remaster. Like I said, it's not worth it. I mean, you can watch this for free on YouTube if you can take the resolution. I wouldn't get into it. Another thing that I loved that they did was get into the problems of the education system. What the education system does to children, the push for conformity, the punishment for people who are, there you go, great. And this is part of what made me fall in love with Gerald Scarfe's art.
Yeah.
I love this guy's work. But here is this headmaster that is shoving a wad of children down into this meat grinder.
the schoolhouse,
And,
which
and
turns into a meat
that-
grinder.
Yes, and that in part is what helped shape Pink's personality that finally broke loose as this evil character.
Yes.
Was the conformity that was pushed and the denial of self. So they had a scene in there where he's writing it's actually the lyrics to the song Money that they quote, but he's writing the lyrics in a classroom, and the school teacher humiliates him
Yes.
for his expression, for him opening up his feelings or anything, humiliates him in front of the whole class. And it becomes part again of this guy shoving down all these negative emotions, stuffing them and stuffing them
Yes.
and stuffing them to the point they finally do explode.
Yeah.
And the one thing I didn't like in this very much was that they turned Pink into this big fascist character. The real story behind all these events in his life is suicide, in my opinion. And a lot of other, Tom, I think you've got a graphic showing a tree with what happens with fatherlessness
Yes.
and father absence.
Oh, there it is.
And we saw some of this in the character. I mean, he was drug abusing, alcohol abusing, smoking. He was depressed. I mean, you could pick a lot of those tags on that tree, and our main character was going through that. They just happened to be the same psychosocial factors that affect all fatherless children.
Yes.
And
You could count them right down the line. It was amazing.
yeah,
It was just amazing.
and I'd see it the way they showed it in society too, because even now we've had what I call 2 fatherless generations in a row now.
Yeah.
And even the young men and women who had fathers in the home are impacted by the culture of fatherlessness.
Yes.
That's
They
right.
adopt the same values as their peers
Yes.
and begin to believe as their peers do.
Yes.
So we have this across the board, and this is why, in the end, I think he was so immensely popular with the crowds, even though it'd become racist and bigoted and all the negatives. I thought that was a misdirection because what they're trying to say is that homophobes are born this way and racists are born this way. And some of that may be true. in that. But guess what? Dead guys are born this way. Guys whose marriages fail, who live with depression quietly and don't go out to do anything fascistic or what. They're just miserable lives.
Yeah.
That's going on with this.
Yeah, and maybe
that's a very
go ahead, Janice.
Oh, go ahead, Tom.
No,
well, I was just going to say that that's a very interesting point, Paul, about how you felt that was a misdirection. I'd be fascinated to learn whether there was any struggle, as you were indicating, Tom, between between Waters and the director, Alan Parker, whether Alan Parker wanted to make it more general. Let's talk about, the fascistic personality, because that seems a bit odd. If this is autobiographical, is this Waters really saying that he was a racist and a fascist and a homophobe?
No,
because he isn't. He never was. He got big into anti-Zionism, certainly, and has been for many years. But that's he's had trouble with PR because he did a concert once some years ago where had a huge pig balloon floating around the stage with Star of David on its back, and so he's kind of he's taken up the Palestinian cause in a very intense way, and I just wondered, because it seemed that the movie did kind of take a detour when it was talking about the fascistic elements of like a demagogic kind of leader. Obviously, he must have felt self-disgust at his own power over his fans and at their adulatory reaction to him. But I really do wonder about that element about fascism or authoritarianism coming in. Maybe that was the director's attempt to make it more of a social statement. I don't know. But the one thing I wanted to say that I found most effective about the movie and most marked, in the sense that this is a kind of late 1970s, early 80s sort of moment that it's characterizing. And it seemed to me that was the last decade, the 70s probably, where you could make a film about male pain without it having a feminist slant. I don't think you could make this kind of film anymore. It would have to have some sort of feminist overlay. It would have to be about toxic masculinity. And I read a review by Roger Ebert where he's most concerned with the fact that in the scene where the main character goes crazy and the young woman is there trying to entice him or something in his room, and he starts smashing everything. Ebert's review is most concerned that he's not aware that she is there. So this is violence against women, even though he never hurts her. He does throw something at her at some point, and it smashes on the wall. But that's minor.
He was
like that is
very
not
conscious that she was there.
Exactly.
Well, that's no awareness.
Yeah. Well, of course, but that's the thing that's most disturbing, Paul. He wasn't aware she was in the room. So it has to be all about her.
No, it wasn't disturbing that this guy's life was imploding and he was caving in and collapsing in on himself and losing all of his sanity and being destroyed. The problem was the girl in the room, who might have been injured.
Yes.
Yeah.
Paul,
and certainly was scared, but didn't leave the room somehow, stays in there, even though she could have just got out the door immediately. But I did think, that I appreciated it for that. There were parts I didn't really understand, and parts that I thought it was kind of going in that kind of late 1970s, if only we could have peace and love direction, although it's also critical of that at times. I mean, hedonism, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, those are not the answers either. So I liked it for its complexity, but especially I liked it that it was interested in a boy's pain and how that develops into a man's pain. And it was interested in that in a way that was not gynocentric. And that would be very difficult to do now. It certainly shows the distance that we have covered in the 40, some plus years since.
Yeah, the backwards that we've taken.
Yeah.
But I had a different take on that fascist scene, Paul. I was thinking that he was in a dream state He was dreaming he was this fascist, you know, because one interesting piece about this movie is that the impetus for the movie came from their last concert of one of their tours. I forget when it was, but apparently Waters did not like the huge crowds, and they'd have huge crowds, like, filling stadiums and bigger. And Waters hated that there was no connection between the audience and him. He hated it. And apparently somebody lit some firecrackers in the last concert that were near the stage. And Waters stopped the concert altogether, and he said, "Stop that! Are you here to listen to the music, or are you here to play around with firecrackers or whatever?" But he was really pissed. He was so pissed that after the concert, he talked with a psychiatrist and with a friend about how he was so furious that happened. He said, "What I want to do is build a fucking wall between me and them." So it's almost like that kind of. You could almost see that as being connected to this fascist that was saying, I'm gonna throw you all out. I am the wall. That kind of thing. So who knows? Maybe there's more than one way of looking at that.
And it makes a kind of sense in a way. I know from just what I understand from following this band for so long is that even at that time there was huge friction between Roger Waters and David Gilmour.
Yes.
What direction he wanted the band to go.
Yes.
Gilmour wanted to be more of a musical setup.
Right.
He didn't even care if there were lyrics to the songs.
Right.
And Roger Waters wanted it all to be about storytelling and lyrics.
Yes.
And they were constantly at odds. And of course, that friction, they produced this masterpiece of an album. I mean, the music on it is phenomenal.
It is.
And they never were able to recreate that after Rodgers left the band.
Yes. And at the same time, they were having huge financial trouble. So it was like you put all these things together. It was just a huge mess,
And it makes sense.
Them having financial trouble.
It is actually, yeah.
They were,
It's hard to imagine
$8 million
that.
down, or 8 million pounds down, because apparently they had financial trouble, and one of the guys who was coming to help them out invested in some tricky sort of things, and they lost a lot of money. They lost a huge amount of money. Something like that. I'm no expert on that piece, but I mean, that was just one more thing that was happening to them at the time. But I'd like to stop for just a second and look at what the research tells us about fatherlessness, if we can, for just 1 second. Because this is important. Fatherlessness brings emptiness and insecurity. If you feel empty and insecure, a part of that may be related to your fatherlessness. Unstable relationships, greater vulnerability to depression, school underachievement, increased likelihood of substance abuse, higher risk of criminal behavior, and lower employment rates. You can see all of these things played out in that movie, just in spades.
That's a short list.
That is the short list. The list that was on that tree were things that spun from those two first things, the emptiness and the, I already forgot it. Well, those two pieces, I'll help myself out. Insecurity and emptiness. Yeah, those two things. From that spring all of this stuff. The teenage pregnancies, the drug use, the this and that, and the spilling the water all over the floor. And so it goes. But those two things just spin, and drives people nuts. And, the movie is a good condensation of how that happens inside someone's mind. These intrusive thoughts that come in. It's just a very powerful kind of thing.
And the combination of, I thought it was really effective in the way that it showed the combination of self-loathing, which then turns into contempt for others, but which is also bound up in your sense that you aren't yourself lovable. And, and so I think that may have something to do with that whole thing about the rock star as fascist, that it comes from his sense that he's not really as good as his fans imagine he is. Then he feels contempt for them, but that's all bound up with his hatred of himself and his sense of emptiness, that nothing he does is ever any good. And and I thought also it was really beautifully portrayed in the failed relationships with women, his inability to respond to women, the animation, those two flowers as well that portray
the
the woman
flowers.
as all devouring, and the fear and rejection of what the woman represents. I again, I can't imagine that being made now, because it seems to be too negative towards women. And of course, we must never have anything negative, even if it's obviously from the man's point of view. But I thought that was really well handled, and I like that. Like the wall obviously is a multivalent symbol, in that at one point it's his sense of himself as a child, or his sense of his father indeed, as simply one brick in the wall. So the wall is authoritarian conformity, it's a fortification, it's the forcing of people not to be their full human selves, but merely to exist to serve some larger purpose. But then, of course, the wall is also something defensive that he builds to protect himself from his fears, from his hatreds, from his painful memories. But then the wall is also something that cuts him off from sources of hope and connectedness, which is what he wants. And I thought all of that was really interesting and well done and complex. And
yes.
Yeah.
He paid homage to his mother in that too. In the song "Mother" on there, one of the final lyrics on that is, "Of course, Mother's going to help you build the wall."
Right.
Mhm.
Right. She's
Yeah.
going to keep you safe.
Yes, keep you safe and keep dirty girls out.
Yes,
That's it.
I know. I thought that's very
Yes.
good.
Yes.
And I think that, oh, sorry, John, go
Janice,
ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I like that at the end, like it doesn't, I think it was criticized for this, that it doesn't have an answer, but I actually like that. I thought it was going to have an answer, and it was going to be peace and love or something sort of, appropriately 1970s-ish, but it seemed to me it wasn't, because it rejects the conformity, the enforcing of, the Dickens-like, recital in the schoolroom. But I don't think it really has an answer, because clearly hedonism and wildness and just doing whatever you feel like, or mass euphoria at a rock concert, which seems the exact opposite of the life-denying experience in the classroom that he had as a child. But it's actually not any better, really. It doesn't bring love and peace and true inner freedom. And so I think the movie ends with a sort of satisfying question about what is a better way, and what is a better route to personal freedom. I don't think it's sure. I mean, well, maybe you guys think differently. Obviously, you have to break down the wall, whatever the wall symbolizes.
Yes.
But what you do once you've done that, you're having to face your fears and your demons and the things that have haunted you.
Yes.
But those things are all still there, and everybody else has their fears and demons as well. So the difficulties continue.
Yes, but you then have the opportunity to be close to those you love. And I got a little bit of a different take on the ending. I felt like it was at least a bit positive. It was kind of saying, you must break the wall, and then the wall crashes down. And then you see this scene with the kids, picking things up and putting things into baskets, these bricks and things. And if you listen to the lyrics then, one of the things the lyrics say at that point is, banging your head against some mad bugger's wall. So it's almost like now he's having to bang his head against someone else's wall. His wall has been blown apart. At least that's what I got from it. Who knows?
Well, well, to me, the wall crumbling is just his defenses in life.
Yes.
Crumbling. I like that it kept going back, and sometimes in some sneaky ways, to the idea of the devouring female. I mean, they showed it was very overt with his mother. But you notice in showing him in his school classroom where he's being humiliated, he's humiliated by a male teacher.
Right.
But in the lyrics to the song, they point out that the male teacher goes home and where fat and psychopathic wives will thrash them to within inches of their lives.
Right.
That is, the devouring female comes right back again as the real source of power in this whole scenario.
And this movie brings that message forth, and it couldn't be more appropriate for today's world. It's like, wow, are you kidding me? It's just like many of the messages in this movie were really right on, like the school stuff.
The school stuff,
we don't need no education. And then putting them into
thought
grinders.
control.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's a very different form. You do not have male teachers, because there aren't any male teachers holding up a voice, right? I mean, you don't have them, tormenting boys in the way that the male teacher is shown doing in the movie because the student is writing poetry or song lyrics, as in this case. You have a very different kind of drive to force conformity, mostly by female teachers, predominantly by female teachers, with the whole rhetoric of anti-racism and anti-sexism and the shaming, especially of boys, simply for being male. Even worse, of course, if they're white males, where they have to take on the mantle of white guilt as well. And so we're having now a whole generation of boys forced to conform, though in the kindest and gentlest possible manner, but left with a very clear message that there is something deeply wrong with them, that they will have to spend the entirety of their lives attempting to atone for, which they never really will atone for. So the message of the hideous deformity of our educational system is as relevant or even more relevant today than ever before, because I think it's even more insidious, and it's reflected in every major institution in the wider culture as well. And because it comes with the message, this is good for you, and we're teaching you this with love, and this is all about loving, but it isn't. It's all about hating, of course. And I think it's very insidious then.
Yeah. And this movie just calls it out perfectly. One of the things I want to make sure we talk a little bit about is the animation stuff, which I found absolutely amazing. Yeah. Just amazing. Let me show you a picture of one of the animations, or many of the scenes with animations would be of flowers. And the flower on the right there is, if in the animation, looked like a vagina. It looked and the other one, the one on the left, looked more like a penis. And man, I mean, they would just go at it, and then all of a sudden the male flower would boom, go into the female flower and penetrate, right? And at that time the female flower turns into Godzilla. It was just the incredible animations. It's like, I was really amazed by it, just absolutely amazed by it. Beautiful stuff.
Yes, make of that what you will, folks. But that was what the message of the animation was.
Yes, indeed.
And we could have an hour-long discussion.
He did not mess around.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was incredible. Just incredible.
I imagine, and I have no way of knowing, but I would imagine that since this was a very personal project for Waters, there probably was a lot of tension about how this story was going to be told. I'm sure that Parker wanted to make this relatable to the largest possible audience, while Roger is always the purist and doesn't even care about money or big crowds.
Right. And apparently the director basically told Waters that he wanted it to be less about him, and I think Waters went along with it, but you can imagine the conflict there, because this is, I think, basically a grief project for Waters.
Yeah,
It's about his grief for his father and for his lack of relationship with his mother and for all this crap he went through at school. All those things.
And that is a big positive, because I mean, knowing that as the sort of the backstory to this is how men grieve.
Yes.
They do it through working through things, working together, doing projects, creating things. This is the path for most men to resolve grief, is they do it through action.
Yes.
And man, I couldn't imagine how you got to be a little bit envious. I mean, Roger Waters has opportunities most people don't have for that kind of creative expression. He can get an idea and somebody will want to make a full movie about it.
Yeah.
But that appears what he did, and my guess it was incredibly therapeutic for him. I wish I knew for sure, but that would be my guess.
It would be interesting to be able to interview him and ask him about it.
Yeah. And I think
Next
those
week,
parts.
regarding men, we'll have Roger Waters here.
Yeah.
Yes, if any of you know Roger Waters, please tell us how to get in touch with him.
If you know anybody who knows Roger Waters,
That's it.
Yeah, tell him we'll give him the opportunity to appear on our show. I'm sure he'll jump at the chance.
I like it, Janice.
absolutely.
But Roger Waters, if you're listening, I think those were the parts of the film that were most powerful too. I found actually the personal parts most powerful, most moving.
Yes.
The little boy, the little Pink, his wretched pain and loneliness and alienation. Those are incredibly compelling.
Yes, I got to put in a plug here too, because anyone who's had a parent die at an early age, this is a loss that's very, very different from almost any other loss. And there's a great little book written on this. It's called The Loss That Lives Forever by Maxine Harris. So if you guys have experienced this, have had a father or mother die at a very early age, before you were 15 even, check out that book. And read the first couple pages and see if you can tolerate it. Some people can't read it. It's potent. But it's very, very helpful. This is a tough loss, Roger. It's a tough loss.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well.
Yes.
Yes.
I guess that's it.
I guess that's it.
I think that's it. So, men
are
good.
Jolly good.
To wait it out. Okay.
Jolly good. It worked. All right, then. You all take care. We'll see you next time.
Have a great week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.